Okay. I'm Harry Watt at North Carolina State University. This is a recording for the insect and kill certification part of the National Firewood Workshop 2021 with the Tennessee focus. And I'm here today with Kathy Kilborne of the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. She works in the Consumer and Industry Services Department as a plant pathologist. And welcome to the National Firewood Workshop.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we really want to hear a lot. There's been a lot going on the last few years regarding kill certification. It's important to the producers. It's important to the buyers, brokers, big box stores, especially with bundle wood. Can you update us with what's happening in Tennessee and nationally regarding kill certification and heat treating firewood?
Yeah, so historically in Tennessee, USDA always handled our heat treatments, but with the regulation of some important pests, that has given us the opportunity to expand and start a certification program. We've been doing that since 2017.
So the stamps were real important for the industry, and that was something that you qualified for a USDA stamp based on your testing of the kill by the feds. So you guys have taken that over, and when that system went away, the industry was very nervous because that sort of gave an assurance it was qualifying that this was good firewood. So you're handling it at the state level now, and your cohorts across the country are also, but not all the time.
Correct. So this is where things get a little bit tricky. So depending on where you are in the country is going to depend on who's able to do your certification. So if you're in an area that has a quarantine for a specific pest that would require firewood to be heat treated, the USDA still has that ability to complete your heat treatment, and you're not really going to be impacted with any of these recent changes. However, if you're in a state like Tennessee or Kentucky, where emerald ash borer was the quarantine pest that allowed the USDA to do a heat treatment certification, states have now taken over that program and have started offering that for our firewood producers. There's a lot of work with standardization, with labels and things like that to ensure that people know that that firewood has been heat treated.
So what you're telling us is it's pretty uniform, regardless whether an individual state does the process or the feds does the process. It's essentially the same process.
Same process. It's just going to have a different label. So instead of seeing that USDA shield that everyone's used to seeing, you may have a state-specific stamp instead.
Okay. Well, tell us what's the difference between seasoned wood, heat-treated wood, and kiln-dried wood.
Seasoned wood is just wood that's been sitting out, aging over time. Heat-treated wood is wood that has been treated to a specific temperature for a specific amount of time. That's what we're certifying here in Tennessee. There's also kiln-dried wood. Kiln-dried wood is wood that has a moisture content that is below a certain percentage. So for example, a lot of kiln-dried wood has to be below 20% moisture content.
Right. So we can kiln dry at 140 degrees and we're not going to be heat treating that wood. Is that what you're telling us?
We can heat treat our wood to 140 degrees for an hour, but the moisture content could still be 50% or something along those lines, which you will see sometimes if you're in the store where you're starting to see a little bit of fungal growth or something on your wood and you think, how is that heat treated? Well, the wood was heat treated. However, the moisture has just allowed some fungus or to start growing in the firewood.
That's right. And when it happens, everybody starts being upset.
Yeah.
When you certify a kill, that's good for 1 year. Is that correct?
Correct. So the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, our kiln certifications are good for 1 year. We do have an annual fee of $100 to cover the cost of going out and doing the certification. So that is one thing different from the USDA with a state certification, is that you will possibly have a fee associated, but I don't think it's too bad. Now, in some cases, if we have a kiln that's kind of new or like barely met the minimum threshold, we will offer a certification for 6 months. So that way we can ensure that their kilns continually operating properly.
Well, I understand you've put together an online publication that explains how certification works in Tennessee and would likely be similar across the country. Could you show us the publication? Share that with us?
Yeah. So what we did at the department, because we were running into a lot of questions about our firewood certification program and how it operates, is we developed kind of a general manual that spells out everything that we're asking our producers to do and everything we're going to do with the department, from the actual certification to the end part where you get your heat treatment stamp. So in the beginning of the manual, we just kind of cover some basics, which is what is heat treatment, what is the heat treatment process like, and we also cover what our requirements are. So in Tennessee, we offer 2 different heat treatments. We offer a heat treatment for a minimum of 140 for the internal temperature of the wood for 1 hour. We also offer a higher treatment standard, which is 160 degrees for 75 minutes. The higher treatment standard allows the firewood to move into states that have higher level quarantines, like Florida, California, New York, and a few others. Another thing that we're requiring in your kiln is that your kiln has thermocouplers. Those thermocouplers are going to allow the producer to measure the internal temperature of the wood throughout the certification process. That's really important because the producer needs to know and be able to make sure that his firewood is reaching whichever temperature he's going for. We do require record keeping. And we also require that once the wood has been heat treated, it's stored in a covered place. And if you are in an area for the imported fire ants, we want you to store your firewood at least 6 inches off the ground to prevent any kind of infestation. We do have different labeling requirements depending on what you're producing. So if you're making packaged bundles of firewood, we want you to have specific labels on each individual bundle. And if you are doing bulk sales, you're required to make sure that each receipt for each load, there's also a label that shows that that wood has been heat treated as well.
Well, very good. That's getting us off to a good start, and I think those requirements would be pretty universal throughout the country.
Yeah. So again, we go through a step-by-step process of what we're asking our producer to do. And the first thing that we ask is for them to kind of complete a work plan. And we have a work plan that's, we want to know what your kiln looks like, what kind of heat you're using, how the baskets are arranged inside your kiln, and just the different things about your operation, so we know how to plan to come and do your certification.
That sounds great.
Yeah, so down at the end of this document, there is a copy of the work plan where we just get your general information, you know, your business, and we ask your information about your test run. So how many thermocouplers were in your kiln? How long did it take to run it, and things like that. And you'll submit that to us. And once you've submitted that, you'll be contacted by either myself or an inspector who's going to come out and do your certification. And then next step really talks about what we do when we get there. So when we get there, we're going to ask that you've had your wood hopefully pre-drilled. We ask you to drill a minimum of 8 logs so we can use our temperature probes to do the treatment. So we use these temperature probes. Each one is individually labeled to test the internal temperature of the firewood. We also ask that you spray paint the end of your firewood, so that way when it's in a basket mixed in with all the other wood, it's kind of easy to spot. Mine was, only spray paint I had was purple, so it's not as bright as we would like. So that's kind of how the process goes. What we'll do is we'll take a piece of wood with our probes and we'll space them out the entire kiln so that we're getting a really good representation of all the different temperatures readings like throughout the whole kiln. We usually rotate top and bottom, left and right for different things, so we're really getting the whole picture. One of the things I also like to do is always take an extra probe and leave it at the front bottom of the kiln where the door is, because usually from what I've seen, that's usually the coldest spot, and if that probe makes it, we know we're not going to have any problems. So that's the next step. So we will close up the kiln. We'll come back whenever you feel like your temperature has been reached. A lot of times we do 24 hours. We come back the next day. So we'll start one day, come back the next day. We'll take out the probes and then we'll read out each of our probes. So the probes that we use are electronic. We don't require that our producers have electronic probes, but they really give us pretty accurate results.
So the placement there, you're showing us a kill that's a longer kill that's loaded from the end. Is that correct?
Correct. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is like a diagram of how we would keep track of where we put our probes. So we'll have a little notebook and we'll draw a diagram so we know where everything was placed. And so the heat source is in the back, the doors in the front, and each of our probes are individually labeled so we know which one's where. And then when we read them out, we mark whether that probe passed or failed.
Right.
The neat part about this, and one thing that I find is really interesting, is when a probe fails. Like, it's sad, like I don't want a probe to fail, but it really lets us kind of look at what could possibly be going wrong within your kiln and maybe what we need to do to adjust to make sure that you're always meeting that heat treatment standard.
Right. Now, dry kilns, I'll mention to you, the typical problems you may have is you may have a fan that's not running. So that's going to give you a cold spot. You may have a heat. If it's a steam, they have traps. And a lot of times those traps get corroded and don't work. There'll be something mechanical, and the dry kiln operator should always check that stuff ahead of time. Don't let the Tennessee department or any other department find that you got fans not running, the belts have burned up, or for some reason the fans aren't running, or if you've got leaks around doors and so forth. It's a waste of everybody's time to fail.
That's true. From my experience, I've seen circulation and insulation are the two biggest factors. And it also could be the type of kiln that someone's built. So we have one gentleman that has a hand-built kiln, and his heat source is firewood or scrap wood, and his heat source, his oven, is actually inside his kiln. So each time he needs to reload, he has to open his entire kiln up, which we've struggled with making sure that he's not losing too much heat each time, which is causing his certification to take, a day and a half, when it really could probably be done in about 12 hours if we could find a way to kind of insulate those baskets. So when he opens up his door, the firewood's still retaining the heat.
Right. And the other thing, the other thing is, baffling is real important. It's hard to push air through firewood because it blocks so much of the airflow. So if you have air that's bypassing the baskets, you're wasting that airflow and it's going to take longer. So if you don't do baffling, it's not only going to cost you every time you run the load, but if you're trying to do the certification, you may not hit the targets.
Correct.
Okay. Well, please continue.
Okay. So again, what our readouts look like. You know, this is important, and I forgot to mention this, so I hope you don't mind if I jump back. But one of the things that we also ask our producers is that when you're picking the wood for us to use for your certification, we want the biggest and the densest wood. So different wood is going to dry or heat treat at different rates. So if you have a basket and it's mixed hardwood, so you have some maple, some poplar, but you also have hickory or oak, we want to use the hickory or the oak for your certification, not the maple, which is going to dry a lot faster, which could make it a little inaccurate for your results.
Okay. And just for the record here, you got density in pounds per cubic foot. Everybody would want to know, is that, I assume that's the green density?
Yes.
That's where that came from. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I forgot to mention that earlier.
Well,
So we have these electronic probes. They are HoboWare temperature probes, and they are digital. So we plug them into our computer, and they give us some really nice graphs that allows us to really see when each probe hit that temperature and for how long it stayed there. For the most part, most of the probes, you'll see a similar pattern throughout, and they're all kind of looking the same. And that's straightforward. We'll look at each one of your probes, and if everything passes, you are issued a compliance agreement. So this is what Tennessee's compliance agreement looks like. It's a lot of words. You can we mark which treatment you did, whether it's the higher or the lower, and then here's our label that you would put on your packages. So we have a new label that really shows that it's Tennessee heat treated firewood, where we put your treatment number, which temperature you reached, and then each person is issued a compliance number. And that number does change annually, so that way we're ensuring that we're not having people use labels that may have expired.
right. I've talked to some firewood owners where they saw other bundle people that copied their stamp and was using it, somebody that didn't want to go through the processor. So we have to monitor this. So if a producer that is passed the test and is doing it finds somebody that's not doing it, should they contact you?
Yeah, they definitely should let their state Department of Agriculture know if they believe somebody might be doing something shifty. So.
Yes. Okay, and this is on your website, and I will list this on the video when I edit it, so everybody will have it, and it'll be in our resources. Is this the end of the certification manual? Oh,
yeah. So that's what we got in our manual.
Okay. Do you have any stories to tell that of ones that failed and why they failed, or anything you'd like to share with us?
We've had a couple. So we've got a couple of gentlemen that are retired, and they're kind of doing heat treated firewood as like a retirement hobby, more or less, not to necessarily produce an income as a large business, or they just want to produce enough firewood for the state parks that they're both close to. And love these gentlemen. They're both so delightful, and both of them kind of have kilns that are different. So one of the gentlemen I mentioned earlier, he built a kiln on the side of his barn. And he just put a really large wood fire oven in there, and we struggle with installation with his kiln. And the other gentleman has a small shipping container that he converted into a kiln, and he has a dual fuel system where he was using propane and another type of fuel as well. And he adjusts his kiln probably every 6 months, and he's got to tweak it. He's one of our 6-month certifications because he's always got to tweak it, and he does lose a lot of air, and we've really had to put a lot of insulation in there, that reflective boards and foam board and things like that that really help him. The bottom, a lot of people don't think about making sure the bottom is super insulated. So that was another one as well. In his compliance agreement, we have him certified where he is required to have his wood 12 inches off the ground as part of his agreement, because it is still a little iffy right there at the base level.
Okay. Well, Katie, we appreciate you contributing. This is an important part of firewood. I'll tell you, all the producers sweat this, that they're going to do the test and it fails, but they actually should be monitoring every load that goes through so they know what the numbers are. But it is a challenge. If you're running a kiln, you want to turn it as quick as you can, but you still need to meet all the certification requirements. And thank you for being with us, the National Firewood Workshop 2021.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, bye-bye.